Hello and welcome. Look, if you're a leader, a strategist, really anyone trying to build something that lasts, you know the single biggest challenge, right? It's trying to figure out an uncertain future. Well, today we're going to dive into a brand new framework for doing just that, all inspired by the ideas in Quiet Asterisk.
So let's just jump right in with a question that I'm pretty sure everyone in business has felt at some point. You build the perfect strategy, you've got the flawless roadmap, that beautiful 5-year plan, and then, boom, the real world just happens. Why does it so often feel like we're constantly trying to just wrestle our own plans back into line?
This quote just nails it, doesn't it? We act like the future is supposed to follow our spreadsheets and our project plans. But the thing is, the future has its own ideas. So the key to making better decisions isn't about creating a more perfect plan. It's about getting a much better understanding of why the future just refuses to be so obedient. All right, so let's pop the hood and see what's really going on. Turns out, our best laid plans are usually derailed by a couple of hidden forces, things we almost never really account for. Let's give them a name. You know, we love to focus on the stuff we think we can control, right? The things we put on our resumes or in the company's annual report. Our skill, our hard work, that brilliant strategy. And look, all that stuff absolutely matters. But there's this other whole set of forces at play. And they're just as powerful, maybe even more so. We're talking about external randomness and our own internal biases. So here they are, our two main culprits. First, you've got the pure, unadulterated role of chance in, well, everything. And second, there are these quiet, consistent, totally invisible rules of our own minds that guide our choices without us even having a clue. So let's break these two down.
Okay, first up, randomness. This is the part of the world that just doesn't care one bit about our plans. And here's the thing, you can't eliminate it. So the challenge isn't to try and get rid of it, it's to learn how to think about it the right way.
We really need to reframe how we think about probability. It is not a crystal ball. It's more like a tool for understanding the texture of reality. It shows us the general direction things are heading, that's the tendency, and all the unpredictable static that surrounds that trend, that's the noise. Our businesses, our lives, they're shaped by both of those things.
Because our brains aren't naturally wired to think in probabilities, we fall into these really predictable traps. First up is the narrative fallacy. Our minds just crave these neat, tidy stories, so we invent a cause and effect story for a chaotic success, totally ignoring all the messy parts. Second, we are constantly confusing correlation with causation. You know, just because the rooster crows when the sun comes up doesn't mean the rooster made the sun come up. And finally, we just consistently overlook the role of luck. We chalk up every win to our amazing skill and every loss to some random circumstance, and that just stops us from actually learning anything.
So, the really crucial point here is this. Our feeling of control is, a lot of the time, an illusion. And recognizing that, well, it's not pessimistic. It's actually strategic. It forces us to build strategies that are tough, that are robust enough to take a hit from a little bit of bad luck. Okay, let's pivot to our second hidden force. So if randomness is all the chaos happening on the outside, this next one is about the chaos on the inside, those subtle, predictable patterns of our own minds.
This is really the core idea of behavioral economics. We like to think we're making these super rational, logical choices. But the truth is, we are constantly being nudged around by these invisible rules. And it doesn't matter if we're just choosing a coffee or deciding on a billion-dollar merger.
You know, classic economic models always assume we're these perfectly rational actors, always moving in a straight line from point A to point B. But we're not. We're real humans. Our path is messy. It's influenced by these invisible patterns. For instance, there's anchoring bias, where we get stuck on the very first piece of information we hear, or how a choice is framed. We react totally differently if something is presented as a potential gain versus a potential loss. And of course, social proof, where we just follow the crowd even if it makes no logical sense. Understanding these patterns, that's a huge competitive advantage.
Okay, so we've laid out the problems, external chance, and our own internal biases. So what in the world do we do about it? Well, we need a new toolkit. And this one isn't focused on trying to conquer uncertainty, but on learning how to navigate it with skill and resilience.
So here's what that more resilient framework looks like. First, you have to name your assumptions. Get them out in the open. What are you taking for granted? Second, you have to actively account for chance. Literally ask the question, what happens if we just get unlucky here? Third, reframe the narrative. Challenge that clean, simple story you're probably telling yourself. And finally, number 4, build for resilience, not for perfection. You want a strategy that can take a few punches and keep on moving. This right here, this is the fundamental shift in mindset. Success in a world you can't predict isn't about having a better crystal ball. It's about building a better ship, one that's strong enough to handle the storms you just can't see coming.
And all of this brings us to the central idea, the one that ties this all together, the concept that gives this whole framework its name, the quiet asterisk.
You know what the quiet asterisk is? It's that tiny little symbol at the bottom of the page that completely changes the meaning of everything you just read. It's the footnote to our grand strategies. It represents that unacknowledged role of luck, or the cognitive bias we all have, or that one single assumption our entire plan is resting on. Finding it, that is the key. So I'll just leave you with this question. As you get ready for your next big strategic choice, your next product launch, your next investment, just take a moment, pause, and ask yourself, what is the small, quiet detail that I'm not seeing? What is my quiet asterisk? Thanks for watching.